Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, along with Patrick Geoffrion-Amorim from Montreal, Canada. Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Episode 109. It's great to have Patrick here. He's been here many times to visit. He's been sending his players here. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you very much, Coach Steve. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Oh, thanks. You have great passion for tennis. Where does that come from? Your start in tennis and such.
Well, it started with me being crawling on the courts when my mom was playing when I was 2-3 years old at Club Mirabel in Pointe-Claire, Quebec.
Mirabel,
yeah.
There was an Egyptian who owned that club.
Yes.
Maggie.
Yes.
Is that right?
Well, I knew Maggie by name, but I was a little bit young. But a few good coaches who I still keep in touch with: Danny Cooper, Frank Hornig, who's actually still my coach right now. So
Helping you out, yeah.
he's been helping me out a lot.
Danny's a lawyer, and I talk to him all the time. But I remember being part of that interview process when he was hired at Maribel. But that's townhouses now, right?
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, too bad. But, no, I grew up 85 miles from Montreal. But tell me, your mom, she teaches, and so that's how you started. She's got the passion.
My mom has the same passion as me, so she's 72 today, and she still coaches full time, like every day, full days, 7 days a week.
And she played growing up, and
she played quite a bit. I think she had a bit of a late start. She maybe started around 20 years old, but developed the bug pretty fast. She was playing a pretty good level. I mean, she still has beautiful strokes to this day. I always tell her that she should be competing, going to some tournaments, but she doesn't like competition too much.
you have to have her come and visit. We have a father of a former student who played college tennis who's coming in next week. He's retired now, and he wants to train for the 60s.
Okay.
But yeah, tell us more about your story in tennis.
So basically, so I started playing tennis at Mirabel Tennis Club when I was maybe four years old. Frank Hornig actually was my first private coach. I was probably around 5 or 6 when I started being coached by Frank. And Frank still tells me a story to this day that I was able to rally 86 balls in a row with him from the baseline. So that's pretty much how I started. And then I got a little bit away from tennis around maybe 7 to 9 years old. Started just playing other sports, a little bit of, I used to love soccer. So a little bit of soccer, skiing, street hockey, things like that. Just all around sports kid. And then I started playing again at this club, Tennis 13, around 10 years old, and quickly just got the love for the game, the passion for the game. I love competing. I've always been a competitor and always had the fire. I always wanted to win. So that's how I got back into like competitive tennis, a little bit more serious. And my stepfather at the time was very, very supportive, and my mother, very supportive of my dreams. So early on, around 11, 12, 13 years old, 14 years old, he would send me a lot to Boletaries to train with a coach, Percy Melzi, who Roberto actually knows, and Everett Tennis Academy. I was working a bit with Andy Brandy, who was running the academy with Harold Solomon, who we met yesterday, and Dubi Petrovic a little bit. And pretty much I ended up at 14 years old. We decided to send me to the Everett Tennis Academy, full-time boarding there.
So you went to school in Florida?
Yeah, I went to school at American Heritage, which is right here in Delray. So basically, I came down for a year here in Florida. And then we made the decision. Actually, after my first year, then I spent a month and a half in Spain with a coach called Luis Waichi. But what happened there is my game kind of got changed. They had a whole different way of teaching tennis. So this my technique kind of switched up a little bit. But when I came back, I had very good results in Montreal after that month and a half in Spain. But then when I came back to Florida, we had made the decision when I came back to Florida to go back with Dubi Petrovic only, not at the Everett Tennis Academy. So trained 2 hours every afternoon with Dubi at Boca West. And we actually my parents bought a place in Boca West, still going to American Heritage. And when I got there, then Dubi pretty much changed everything. He didn't really like what was done in Spain. So this was kind of the beginning of the confusion for me. Still had some good results for maybe the next year. Pretty good results in Montreal and everything. I think I got up maybe to 5th or 6th in Quebec, maybe top 15 in Canada at the time, maybe top 20. Yeah. And then my parents, it's personal, but I'm a pretty open person. So my parents, my stepfather and mother separated. So we sold our place in Florida, and my mom and I moved back up to Montreal. And then it became the tennis became a little bit more challenging. Didn't have a coach there. We kind of joined a sports study at Tennis Routine, but just on certain days, kind of just was playing a little bit in the morning with some adults, 7 to 9. Lost a little bit the bug. Wasn't as motivated. So kind of the training got a little bit sloppy for the next year. And at that point, I started having issues with my forehand, and everybody who knows me in the tennis world knows that I've always had, since around that time, they've known that I've always had some problems with my forehand. You call it a bit of a complex, but you're kind of right. So I kind of lost the conformity. But anyways, I was still able to to have the opportunity to go to university in the States. So we chose the University of Maryland in Baltimore County, which at the time the first coach was Coach Keith Puryear. And I had a friend in Montreal who was a senior there. He was actually the captain, Nick Savage Pollock. He still plays very very good tennis in Montreal. He was at the time he was number 1 on the team. But for me, going to university like that, up until university, I was a pretty disciplined kid, good work ethic, not wild, not crazy. Just did my tennis, studied, didn't go out too much, kept to myself. Got to university, no mom, free a little bit. And my mom was always a little bit overprotective when I was younger, like a lot of moms are. So in university, went a little bit wild. There was the parties, some poker, gambling, things like that. And kind of lost track of my studies a little bit and ended up getting kicked off the team after a year for my GPA. And the next year after that, I ended up just playing on the club tennis team a little bit, but still was off track. It took me a little bit more time to get back on track. And actually, and again, I'm pretty open, so I don't mind telling people this, but I almost got kicked out of the actual university the year after, again for GPA. But worked very hard when I got back to Montreal that summer. So it was the summer of 2010. Worked extremely hard on my tennis in Montreal. Got disciplined, didn't go out too much, and improved my game a lot in that summer. I felt I was playing well, and I was hoping that the coach would actually take me back on the team in September, and he didn't. But the coach, the new coach at this time was Rob Hubbard. And he had an ATP ranking, I think, at one point around 400 in the world or something like that. Don't know if you're familiar with him or not.
No.
Okay. But basically, he told me that if I can get my GPA up to, certain amount, think it was maybe a 3.5 or something like that, 3.3, 3.5. And if he'd see me keep practicing, staying disciplined, and improving my game, improving my fitness, he'd take me back on the team the following year. So I started right away, and at the time I met my first girlfriend. Her name was Alexandra Diamandi. She was on the team as well, from a girl from Toronto, and she ended up helping me a lot as well with being more disciplined and everything like that. So it kind of happened at the right time. So I got serious. Grades went up a lot. Tennis game kept up and kept improving.
And
But
the coach actually put you on a contract, correct?
not yet. This was more verbal, but I worked hard, and again in the summer, Montreal worked hard, and met with the coach beginning of the next season. So it was 2011, the fall of 2011, and at that point he said, "Okay, I'll take you back." And at that point, I was a walk on because I had been kicked off for 2 years. So I'll take you back, but now you're gonna have to have a contract. So you're gonna have to
I
be.
heard you mention it earlier. Go on, tell us about that.
So the GPA to stay on the team is this, but for you, it's gonna be this. It's gonna be, again, probably the 3.3, 3.5. You're gonna have to be the first one to practice, the last one to leave. You're gonna have to be extraordinary, like perfect. And I did that. I was extremely serious. He ended up putting me on the lineup, playing first doubles with a young man, Christian Hodel, who I think he had ATP ranking of around 700 at a certain point. And Christian actually helped me a lot with my tennis back in the day. Again, my forehand, but he helped me quite a bit. And I improved quite a bit with Christian. Christian took a lot of extra time after practices, early in the morning, on weekends, helping me out with my tennis, with my fitness, helping me tactically, technically. So I really appreciate, if he ever sees this, I appreciate it, and it meant a lot to me. So again, went back to Montreal, kept working hard. And when I got back to school in the fall of 2012, the coach called us in, and when he announced the new captain for the upcoming season, I was sure it was going to be one of the guys who's been on the team for 4 years, playing on the lineup, full scholarships and all, and then he ended up choosing me.
That's a great turnaround.
Yeah, and he thought I'd be a good leader. How I turned my life around in university. He thought I'd be a good example to the other teammates. So I took that as a big responsibility and a great honor.
So some of the specifics in the contract, the review were being early, doing extra GPA. Wanting to expound upon that.
Just being the role model for everybody else in the team.
Yeah.
If you're on the court, if everyone's doing their warm up, I'd be the first one to take the skipping rope. I'd warm up first, and then I'd be the one starting to skip. I'd make sure I'm there to help the teammates, be a good example to the teammates. If I saw one slipping, talk to him, explain to him what I've been through.
And I know they've dropped their program, but they were very competitive, correct?
Not bad. I think our big rival was always Binghamton. Back in the days.
SUNY Binghamton, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we beat them once, and we went to the NCAA championships. I can't remember if it was while I was there or the year before I arrived when Nick Savage was a junior. But we always made the finals, and we were always kind of on and off the rankings, NCAA, so somewhere between 65 and off the rankings. We had a couple players who got ranked as well in the top 125 while we were there. But it was a beautiful campus. The headmaster, his name was Harbowski. He was a complete believer in academics, honors university. Didn't have a football team because he felt it went against academics. But we were big in soccer. We had one of the top soccer teams, NCAA Division I. We had one of the top lacrosse teams, top swimming programs. So it was a great university, and it helped formed who I am today.
Oh, it's a great story, especially when you hear it, the turnaround. And I think certainly in college, that happens for sure, where people they're away from home and start to celebrate Tuesday and start to celebrate Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And with how's it go? The 12-ounce curls, low to high.
Yeah.
Yeah. But with from there, I mean, we could reflect before you go post college. And just in talking to you, you had so many different coaches.
Yeah.
And then now at the end, Frank Hornig, who's originally from Germany, he was a banker. So he started in our academic program that we had, where you get a college degree. But a technician, which is unusual, really, to have someone who teaches the way Frank teaches. Correct? I mean, it's not the industry norm. But we could touch upon that before you go post college. You said that he's now working with you again. Correct? You're working with him on your coaching and also still helping you with your tennis game.
100%. I consider him my coach and one of my mentors. So how that kind of reignited during the first lockdown in Montreal, the first COVID lockdown. So back in March 2020, it was kind of middle of March 2020. It was just kind of an idea that came up to my head, but I started thinking, how can I improve my strokes during this situation, during this lockdown? I'm sure there's ways, shadow swinging, slow work, and I don't know why I just decided to contact Frank on Facebook one day. I always knew he was a technician, very good with biomechanics, and I had asked him a couple questions about Alex and Zach during that season.
Yeah, that's two players that Patrick works with, two brothers.
Yeah, great boys. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about them a little bit more afterwards.
Yeah.
But
love tennis. They're getting better. No, it's great how committed you are to those two players and the other players. But with Frank, I think this is for our listeners. So if he's working with you when you're 6 years old, and all these years later, you know that if someone's really teaching you sound fundamentals, granted, there's so many chapters in tennis and so many subtleties, nuances, but the basics are the basics all the way through.
100%.
Short, compact swing, all the checkpoints. Say, for example, how someone hits a forehand volley. Maybe with a 6-year-old, definitely with a 6-year-old, you're making sure their palms behind the racket, and then there's not many advanced techniques. There's no such thing as a perfect grip with the least amount of adjustment. So then you let people go to a composite grip, which is almost a continental. So it changes, but for the most part, a forehand's a forehand, a circular swing. I think that many times what happens is the parents think, okay, I had my child do the basics. Now they move on to more advanced tennis, but
too quickly sometimes.
Well, but too quickly, but without the idea that you still have to do all the routines, and you just think about so many things we mentioned all the time in the podcast. The fundamentals, whether it's a 3-point stance, someone coming around the blocks, how someone putts in golf, the basketball player, the follow shot, baseball player, the stance, the swing. People are so lucky if they're told. I think a Bradenism, if they're told the right things in the very beginning. A Bradenism is there's no such thing as little strokes for little folks.
Yeah.
But so when you think about your odyssey, your journey in tennis, and one academy to another academy. I mean, when Harold Solomon came to visit the other day, we're working with his grandson. You said you'd spent a month there. You really had all these opportunities to be at different places, and there's positives to that. But we will always say, for the most part, one bad coach is better than 10 different coaches.
Yeah.
So, but go ahead with Frank. Why don't you make a couple comments on that, and as far as how that would, you just think about all the different coaches, and now you're back. You know, it's more than 20 years later, right? So
Yeah.
Maybe 25, right? 26 to be exact.
Yeah.
26, so you're 32. Born in 1990. But with Frank, he's helping you now more so as a teacher, correct? Teacher, coach.
Yeah, but he's helping me with my game as well. So, of course, teaching me how to be a better teacher, how to be a better coach as well. So he has so much knowledge. So it's just every minute I get to spend with him, I'm learning.
Yeah, no, I would say that Frank. I mean, he went to Tennis Tech, but student of the game. He's a Bradenite.
Yeah.
Maybe he, like some of our students, did a weekend here or there with Vic, but that doesn't matter. Is Vic the resource?
Yeah.
So some of us. I mean, I was so fortunate to work with Vic, the man, but Vic, the resource. You can tell in a New York minute if someone knows Braden methodology.
Yeah.
And that's something I talked about to Mike McLaughlin about often, who's a guest on our podcast, that we're making efforts towards, not only with Vic, but with other tennis teachers from the past, that physics is not a fad. I mean, the Tennis 2000, you get an old copy, Tennis for the Future. This is fact-based instruction.
Yeah. I like the way he says that the dimensions of the court and physical laws dictate stroke production, no coach's opinion or any unique theory.
That's good that you have that down. Anytime I'm with the coaching staff, I tell the director, you need to make this mandatory, make people recite it.
Yeah.
Make them recite. I do that with training of coaches, parents. It's like mechanical prayer. So everybody repeat after me.
Yeah.
The dimensions of the court and physical laws. That's great, that connection. Post-college.
So post-college, basically I didn't go into tennis right away, into coaching. My first job was working in business development for my stepfather, actually. So I reconnected with my stepfather, and I was working business development. At the time, he had a paper. It was called a paper sector. They made sectors for factories that made paper. So I was a door-to-door salesman for him and in charge of the business development there. So and he also had me working in the actual factory, getting my hands dirty, which I think that's also an important job for everybody to have as well. Learning how to weld and sew and all these different things.
What was your degree in?
My degree was in financial economics. I studied also to take my first certificate of accounting, but then I decided I wasn't very passionate about accounting, so I decided just to go into business development. And after a year working for my stepfather, I ended up getting another job for a company called Le Site. Le Site was an e-commerce agency. They built websites for different companies. They did the digital marketing for different companies. So I was going to conferences for them, basically selling their services on the phone, setting up meetings. So basically that was that. And then while I was working at this company, I kept having I'd be at the office all day and my foot would just be going. For me, sitting behind a desk at an office, it was just not for me. I had to be out and about. So I actually ended up at the end of every workday going and coaching tennis 3-4 hours every night and the full weekend. So all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And I was just very, very excited to do it. I didn't need any days off, nothing. I just wanted to be on the court coaching tennis. And the owner at the club always, his name is Lloyd Present. He always had a saying. Every time he saw me, he'd look at me and he'd say, "You're the future of tennis. you're the future of tennis. He would just always say that to me, and it kind of just stayed in my head, you know, and it got more and more imprinted. And at one point I decided, you know what? I think you're going to be most successful in life doing what you're passionate, you know, doing, and being able to wake up, being happy to work, being excited to go to work, being able to work 80 to 100 hours and be happy doing it and have fun doing it. So I sat down with the owner and we negotiated a contract, and I ended up signing to work there full time at the club I'm at right now. So Club Côte in Montreal. And originally I was supposed to what we had agreed is I'd be working half in business development to continue kind of what I had been working in the other two companies, and as a tennis coach the other half. As the years went by, it kind of evolved to kind of a director of leagues, events and tournaments, and kind of in charge of all the competitive tournaments and events and leagues that come through the club, and tennis coach. Just to backtrack a little bit, I also love organizing tournaments. I have a big passion for organizing tournaments. In 2018, there was a young Canadian player my age. His name was Noah Joly-Messier. He was number one in Canada back in the day, ranked ahead of Milos Raonic. And he passed away at 17 of cancer.
Wow, it's so sad.
I wasn't that close with him, but he was still well known in our little tennis world in Montreal. So, and I had always wanted to organize a tournament. So the first year I organized a tournament in his honor. Didn't charge much. Charged $10. I called it the Noah Joly-Messier tournament. And whatever I would raise through donations or entry fees, whatever I had left at the end of the tournament, I donated it back to Children's Cancer Research. So the first year I had around 70 players, and 6 years later I had 600 players.
Wow.
Yeah, and at that point I even had a prize pool, 14,000. A guy, Eric Schwoika, who was ranked 200 ATP, won the tournament. And we had raised quite a bit of money. I'm pretty sure over the 6 years we raised over 150,000 towards children's cancer research. Plus, I got to do what I love doing, so I got to organize these big tournaments.
Now let's come back to organizing tournaments, but also I want to talk to you about what's the owner's name again?
Lloyd Present.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you about just the facility itself, but I know you're very open. You come down to visit. You're here to have me coach you. I have some critics of the website, which is great. You need critics. You need to be your own best critic. Like, say, Austin Krajicek was our previous guest, and he had a couple dogs barking in the background. And, I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, I think people really will enjoy that podcast if they haven't already listened to it. But some of my podcast coaches will say, you should have had Austin put his dogs away. It's like, oh, come on, it wasn't that bad. But I think it would be great for you just to pound your fist on the table. But some of our listeners will be they won't be watching this. They won't be smart enough not to look at my ugly mug, and they'll just listen to it in the car, and you're going like this. And someone's going to say to me, what is that noise? So you don't have to put your hands down.
Yeah.
But I think pounding the table would be good. But I know that I hope that I don't sidetrack you, but we'll get right back into the tennis.
No problem.
Tell us about the structure of the facility, indoor, outdoor. It sounds like a magnificent place.
So basically we have 9 indoor clay courts. We have 4 indoor hard courts. We have an indoor soccer field. We have 3 racquetball courts. 1 is being used for basketball right now. We have 5. I should know this, but I think we have 5 indoor squash courts, maybe 6, but I think it's 5. We have 6 outdoor clay courts, an outdoor swimming pool, a full gym, 2 stories. The upstairs is a little bit more of a modern setup with the turf, sleds a little bit like you guys have here at the FM Performance Center. All the cardio equipment is on the top. Downstairs, the full weight room, the studios for yoga, karate. We run different classes. We also have a school because we had an interesting project a couple of years back. I think it was a great idea, so it could be great if it came back. But we had a school there, so the kids would train before class, shower quickly, go to class, come back at lunch, train. If they had to go back to class, they'd go back for an hour and a half, come back, train their sports study in the afternoon. I think it was a good concept. But there were some complications. It didn't fully work out. I think we still use the school a little bit in the summers. We have one of our parents runs an autistic camp for. So they're using it throughout the summer. During the year, some of the kids will use it, like the kids who do online school or homeschooling. They'll go there for quiet, peace of mind, to work on their studies. Maybe we use it for conferences. We also have a full-time masseuse at the club. A couple offices in the back. So that's it. And also this year we'll be using the school a little bit more because we have a couple girls who are going to be doing, it's called the international program. So they'll be studying homeschool or online school, and they'll be training 8 to 10 in the morning, maybe a private at 7 or 10, and then they go to the classrooms, they study. If we need to bring in tutors, we'll have some tutors for them, and they come back and train from 2 to 5. So that's basically the facility. And the location is kind of good as well. Depends. It's there's positives and negatives. It's located right next to the airport. So I've had ideas and talks with the owners that it eventually can become a hot spot where you can have players fly in, come train there, maybe create some sort of dormitories, housing. But the con is during traffic hour, because it's kind of in the intersection of all the major highways in Montreal. So it can be a little bit challenging to get there for 4 or 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning.
With backtracking organization, I think running leagues, tournaments as well, but leagues, that's not so easy, correct?
I mean, I enjoy it. For me now, it's kind of become a little bit more automatic. Maybe at the beginning it was a little bit more challenging, but
I think organizing the schedule, the courts at times and such, but it's the teams and who's the team captain and how does that all work? Do you have team practices at the club, and is it inter-club league and in-house league? How's that work?
So basically, I run what's called the Sunday league. I also run the Thursday night league. So my format Thursday night is very simple. I reserve 6 to 8 courts. It's singles. You play a regular set with ads. The only twist is if it gets to 5-5, you play a tiebreaker, and I just make it an up and down. So you win, you move up a court. You lose, you move down a court. And usually the players have time for about 2 to 3 sets in 2 hours. And most of the players come back every week because I keep a ranking, and I combine the Thursday and Sunday league. My Sunday league is a little bit different, the format. It's still a set, 5-5 tiebreaker, no ads, because indoor tennis and I only have 2 hours. But what I'll do there is I'll create groups of 8 players. I'll base it on the UTR, and I'll create a mini draw. So you'll have the quarterfinals. If you win, you go to the semis. You lose, you go to the back draw. And by the end of the 2 hours, you have on the first court, they're playing for first, playing for third, playing for fifth, playing for seventh. And I have 8 different groups. So if you win, let's say you win in group 3, you get a wild card to go to group 2 the next Sunday.
That's great. That's how the league tennis works in Europe. I think Willie Schutte, part of our alumni network, he ran a program, Coffee with Willie. Wasn't really a round robin, but it was early in the morning and had the courts packed with the old guys like me. And then I know Mark Hamlin had a league. It was called the Moonlight League. I think maybe it started at 11 p.m. I mean, late at night.
Yeah.
And just have the courts busy.
Yeah.
It's nothing worse than an empty tennis court, right?
Yeah. Well, my Thursday night one is late, but not 11 p.m. It's not 9 to 11.
That's pretty late, yeah. But of course, I go way back with Mark Hamlin. That may have been when Becker and Graf were one in the world, and tennis just exploded in Germany. So the boom in Germany was after the boom in the U.S. Tennis boom in the U.S. was in the 70s, Germany the 80s. But no, people were playing. It wasn't like they were playing around the clock, but pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, my mom at Mirabel, she used to tell me that there was even leagues that went till 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
People would come. So I wonder if it would work in today's world, but I'm not as sure.
I just got a phone with Vic Diamond, who's in his 39th year of high school coaching, and he's off to play pickleball. Again, I'm just upset that pickleball is invading tennis, but now it's going to slow down here for a week or so. I'm going to go buy some pickleball rackets, and I'm going to start sending some kids to pickleball. You can't beat them, join them. It's coming. It's a wave.
Yeah.
And it's a forward game, and I think pickleball might, in its own way, if we're clever, which I don't think we have been enough in tennis, in so many ways, it could be a way to save doubles, to get young tennis players playing pickleball.
Yeah.
The park that you and I are in the mornings, and I don't know how it would work if we send some hotshot juniors over there to play pickleball. They actually may be too good for that level, and I don't know how they would react to that, because there are some young people. There's no children. There's no teenagers playing pickleball. I mean, I'm over there every day, walk by.
Yeah.
But how about your place? Do you have pickleball?
We have pickleball. So we're lucky. Our head coach Ernesto, I believe his name is Ernesto Fajardo. I believe he's second in Canada. Wow. In pickleball, and extremely passionate about it. Great young man. Seems like a good pickleball coach, and he has it pretty busy. There's a lot of leagues, a lot of interest.
So you have pickleball, you have squash. I one time had the title of director of racket sports, and I was asked about squash. I worked for TCA, Tennis Corporation America. They based me in Midtown. They based me in Rochester, the Midtown Club. In fact, we met with a coach today, Steve Sabo, who is now working for Midtown West in Florida. His wife was here. And so I was in charge of squash. I remember telling the people, I can spell it, but I can't cook it. But I remember hiring the Cornell coach who wasn't too far away. And, got him on the phone and said, hey, we'll pay you money to train our staff. I remember it was Joe McMahon. I've used squash courts to teach tennis. I was in Switzerland one time, and I was some players, and I had the tennis kids warming up with a tennis ball, tennis strokes, and a squash court, and all the Swiss kids, and there was kids from all over the world. But I noticed the Swiss kids, they had tennis rackets and tennis balls that they were playing squash with it. And it just made me think, no wonder Roger Federer can hit these amazing squash shots when he's in the corner. So, you can be too structured, too principled, where, okay, just go play a little squash. So you have squash, pickleball, anything else?
Racquetball, soccer.
Well, I know you mentioned soccer and indoor soccer as well.
Indoor soccer, yeah. Not outdoor soccer.
Were any of the courts converted from, was soccer, was any of the space formerly tennis courts?
Yes, it kind of went through a few different conversions. So I was playing tennis at the club in year 2000 and year 2001. So back then the nine clay courts were red. It was like a red dirt carpet surface. Actually, even one of those courts was a gym at the time. Then I remember this is more than a couple of years, maybe like 15 years ago, where the soccer field used to be. I think they used to have 6 squash courts and 2 more hard tennis courts, plus the 4 the 4 hard courts. So there were 6 hard courts.
Yeah.
They switched that back to kind of just I think badminton and maybe like kind of a small indoor soccer. It was like a rubber surface, small indoor soccer, some basketball. Then they switched it back to 2 hard courts, and then now they switched it to a soccer field.
You know, having grown up 10 miles from Canada, 12 miles, and spent a lot of time in Canada, lived in Canada for 2 years. I don't know the level of badminton, but in this country, badminton is a picnic sport, and people don't know how to play. But to see it really played, I spent a lot of time in Berlin teaching tennis, and saw the badminton courts and say, let's teach these kids specialty shots. I should say emergency shots. Everything's a continental grip, and you don't really see badminton in the U.S. You know, my experience is there hasn't been much badminton, but I think all young kids should when they're really young, is get a badminton racket and just be able to really swing, really get the service motion down, really light racket, and throw the birdie up and hit it.
It's a fun sport, actually. I remember playing it a lot, like in middle school and a little bit in high school. It was fun.
I remember being at the Super Show with Robbie Seguzo. You know, he won the Olympic gold medal. I think he has 5 Grand Slams in doubles, and he brought him out of the court, and you know, it didn't take him too long to be able to have some fun with badminton. But it's not your. That's one thing about pickleball is I have been told in watching it is people say that you're better off with swing volleys. You know, the spec racket, which is very good as a bridge sport, was something that Dave Fish taught me, is that you know you use this racket, and you know I should have known that, but I didn't know the term. Back when people played paddle tennis, not platform tennis, but paddle tennis, with the story about Thea Gibson. You know, it's a wooden mallet that's perforated, and you just puncture the tennis ball. And you know, what an amazing story. She developed her throwing motion playing baseball, and when she played, it's kind of captured in that movie The League of Your Own, where Althea Gibson, the men were all at war, World War II, and the women were playing baseball, and every town had a baseball team. People came out to watch the baseball team, so that tradition was carried on. But in her backyard, Roosevelt thought the tennis courts were too big. And now, still in Venice Beach, California, they have paddleball played, where it looks a little bit like pickleball, but it's a forward game. But the thing is that it's not such a light ball. I mean, pickleball is a wiffle ball.
Yeah.
And the spec racket is obviously lighter, but it's basically this. I mean, I think it's unfortunate that in tennis now we have pop tennis, touch tennis, pickleball, padel, and maybe it's a good thing, but you know, the pickleball, touch tennis, pop tennis, the old paddle tennis, they have it geared towards playing tennis. In a lot of ways, it's mini tennis.
It can help your tennis game a lot.
If the biggest word in the dictionary. Some instruction, but also like with that. I mean, tennis players are shining in pickleball. But you're let's go with this now. You're really interested in helping players reach competitive levels. Correct? Yeah. And then being tuned in with what we're doing, you're going back to think about how you were trained. I mean, I started playing tennis when I was 19. I mean, I'd knocked the ball around a little bit before that, but I got into tennis when I was 19, and I was taking lessons, so it wasn't through osmosis that I was learning tennis. And I remember how I was taught, and the more I read, the more I observed, it was like, whoa. And you know, that's one of the people ask me, you know, the motive behind the GreatBase is, I mean, I just know every day around the world is young kids and entry-level adults, everyone, but young kids, they're not getting a good start.
No.
They're not being well taught.
And you explain it well, you know, when you speak to all the kids, when you speak to all of us, you can grow to be a weed or you can grow to be a flower. Which one do you want to grow to be?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of weeds.
Well, and to be a flower, the gardener, they get down on their hands and knees, and you have to work at it. And but teaching's information transfer, and kids really need to be taught. No substitute for a good beginning.
Yeah.
What's your role at the club now? Still the same, or is it are you just focused primarily on teaching, coaching, or do you still do the organization work?
I still do quite a bit of administration with the owner and the other high performance coaches as far as setting up the curriculum for the after school programs, the sports study programs, and I'm still heavily involved in competitive tournaments, leagues, and then of course coaching. So I enjoy coaching the 10 to 18-year-old age bracket, the kids that are competing, playing tournaments, developing. That's kind of my passion right now. That's my role. That's my current role at the club.
And how big is the staff? How many coaches? Tennis coaches.
Tennis coaches. So in the high performance team, we're 5 coaches. That's the high performance, the ones that work with sports study, international program, after school. Then I'd say we have probably another 10 coaches that will work during the week with juniors. And then you have the recreational programs on the weekend where we have maybe another 7 to 10 coaches. And then you have the adult coaches. So the adult coaches, I would say there's about 4 or 5 coaches. I'm kind of giving a ballpark right now, but
Well, yeah, part-time, full-time.
exactly, yeah.
The synergy, getting all the coaches on the same page. I think it's so important to connect like early childhood development, the ECD classes, with high performance. And our listeners know I don't like high performance. I have the wise guy response. Someone tells me they're a high performance coach, and I say, hi, I'm Steve, I'm a low performance coach. I was listening to Fergus O'Rourke, an Irishman who spent some time with us. He was a guest on our podcast, and he's at Tennis Memphis where we spent some time. And he has a podcast. His first guest was well-spoken. And I like what his first guest said about their program. They use the title Junior Development, which is going way back when. And that word development, or it's kind of like with stroke production with, we for years have called classes ECD, early child development, skill acquisition, and then tournament prep or tournament training. Skill acquisition. Certainly they need cooperative skills, athletic skills, but then the technical skills. So how is that right now? Is there continuity? Maybe I'll get you in a little bit of trouble, but is there continuity, consistency from one program to the next? Is the staff on the same page? I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, we're on the same page," and it's like, no, you're not even out of the same book.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge in all clubs.
Yeah.
So definitely coaches are not all on the same page, especially technically. But as far as goals for the program, communication, not bad. We're improving. Right now the owner Lloyd is a little bit more involved, so he's come up with some good ideas, such as having kind of a mandatory meeting every Monday, where all the coaches come together with him. He gets us lunch. We discuss the plan for the week, any issues that might have arisen, how to deal with different situations with the parents, this and that. It's always going to be a challenge to get everybody on the same page technically. I wish it would be easier for me to sell the GreatBase to.
Well, I tell you this. I told a coach today who came to visit. We had 3 coaches that spent, one in particular spent a lot of time in Philadelphia. Dennis Vandermeer, match play and simulated drills, but then just set up 2 courts and give people a choice, and they're going to go to match play and simulated drills. But then the technical training you say, okay, you have to spend at least 10 minutes of technical training, and why you want them on the technical training is, especially with the phones today, just film from behind. You don't have to do everything we do. It's filming 3 different angles, skill testing, and filming points. But if you're going to use one of the 3 angles, the 45, the side, or from behind, film from behind. Film the, at least the forehand ground stroke, the backhand ground stroke, and the serve. Now, I have film from the 80s. The students that were training to teach tennis, Frank Hornig, I would have film of Frank Hornig on how he hit the ball the first day I met him. But it was, back in those days, it was, okay, we filmed from behind the forehand, from behind the backhand, and the serve. And, it doesn't, you could look at old film and go, no, this one's from 45, and this one's from the side. Then even to have a 10 ball skill test. But then you have to document it. So then when you sit down with the parents, I think someone coming in when they're trying to slowly change the tennis culture, get people on the same page. For me, I would go in as a consultant and say, okay, everybody has to be filmed. Everybody has to be filmed. You don't have to be a player, but if you're teaching tennis, we know you have to demonstrate strokes. We'll just toss balls to the underhand. Because there's tennis teachers that haven't played in years and years. Might be a bad knee, this, that, or the other thing. But then have them make the videos. Okay, you have to have a video made, but then you have to make one video. And you start to rule out opinion. Well, no, your racket's too far behind your back. Your palm is up. Yeah, you can have a high toss, but your racket stops. It's a hitch. It's not a continuous motion. The body's leader is a leader. Oh, no, when you hit your serve, you're bent at the waist. You end up, some kids actually displace force, take energy away from them, and they skip backwards. So you have to be clever. I think, it's, if you can convert one person at a time, but you have to say, okay, we have to stand with principles. We'll give you a choice right now. I mentioned that on a previous podcast. I did that in Tyler, Texas, and the kids who came to the technical training ended up being the better players. They're going to choose what they want, not what they need.
Yeah.
But I think film. I can remember being in Japan with Hubert Crash at the TTC, Hiro Yoshida, the tennis training center, and certainly they had a translator where there's that expression, something's lost in translation. They had a stage, and the film was so large that the player was life size, and you could stand right next to the player. So I had the coaches come up on stage with a pointer, like a school teacher pointer, point to the flaw, and make it be very, very specific, because it's so easy to say, yeah, we all get along, oh yeah, everything's going great, and if it was language, it's like, okay, this person's speaking Portuguese and this person's speaking French, and there's not consistency, there's not continuity. But, and I think also businesses, if you come in and kids have been just, it's a wild, wild west, and it's a free-for-all, and it's just been live ball drills, and then you start teaching technique, businesses really worry about the bottom line. Okay, the business is going to go down. And I do think that a lot of clubs will say, okay, we'll change for the 10 and unders. Tell me about Quebec tennis. I've been a lot of nationals in Canada, and it seemed like the players from Quebec, when you'd be at a national tournament, they were together. They had more of a team unity than the other provinces.
Well, Quebec is known for family. Quebecers in general, the culture is very family orientated. On my father's side, they're Quebecer, and every Christmas they get together, and the whole family, the grandmother, all the cousins. It's very very close knit for marriages, Easter, this that. Families in general are very close. So I think it's just part of the culture in Quebec.
Part of it's the language too, right? I mean, as far as you're the only French-speaking province
In Canada, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, Ontario more and more. Ontario's starting to speak a little bit more French. I'm not sure the other provinces. Maybe New Brunswick a little bit.
through Richard Hernandez years ago. It was fascinating. I had a job for a short period of time training the PE teachers, teaching them how to teach tennis at the French immersion schools in Ontario. I can't remember all the specifics, but I think you had to start by the second grade. Third grade, you were out. Third grade, they might make an exception if you were from a household where you spoke two languages and neither were English. But people in this country may not know, but a French immersion program, and they have them in other subjects, or I should say other languages. I know a couple kids that have done Chinese, that when they go to math class, they go to science class, it's being taught in French. Everything's taught in French the whole day.
That's good though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can remember being dumber than a pile of rocks and taking Spanish and going, I will never use this. And, for years and years, I always thought Spanish was the second tennis language. I would say that my opinion is that Russian is now. You go to tournaments, you just hear Russian.
Yeah.
You hear Russian everywhere. But no, I mean, I just had a sense that it was more team unity.
Yeah, they're close knit. They're close knit.
How about Montreal with, is it Bonfiga? I know he's not there now, but the federation do you have a handle on what's going on with the federation and what they do in Montreal versus Toronto? And
I know Borfiga did quite a good job with the federation, and a few good players came up with him overseeing everything. Felix, Dennis, Leila, Andreescu, they all came up when Borfiga was running the show. Right now, I believe it's I'm just remembering his name.
Well, think about it.
Sylvain Bruno,
Say it again?
Sylvain Bruno,
Okay.
who was the coach of Andreescu. I believe he's in charge of Tennis Canada
Okay,
now.
all right.
I'm more familiar with Andre Labelle. I've worked a little bit next to Andre Labelle, and he focuses on the 13 and under. So he works with a couple of the players I'm working with right now.
I know the late Bob Brett was there at one point but he was in. Well, I'm sure going back, yeah, he did spend time in Montreal, but I think he spent more of his time in Toronto.
Yeah.
With Tennis Canada, I think they did, and they still do, I believe, which is so wise, is when they send teams to Europe, they send an old coach and a young coach, because I think that it's a good mix instead of having two old coaches.
Yeah.
I think another thing with Tennis Canada is that the players have been able to go to Europe, and then however they do it through the Canadian ranking system, that like if an American kid goes to Europe, it may hurt his chances to get into Kalamazoo. I mean, if there's really, really good now, they have, which they didn't have for years, they have wild cards for juniors. I know the federation, they've lost a lot of money during COVID with the Canadian Open, but for several years they were sending juniors at the beginning of the summer. They'd go home and they'd come back again. So they would go home and play nationals and then go back to Europe a second time. That's the first time I saw Felix. How do you say his last name?
Oje Aliassime.
Brad Gilbert's pretty clever. He goes double A, Felix double A.
Yeah.
And doesn't have to pronounce the name, but I saw him play in Europe. And I think it was two places, Slovenia, then Austria. But then like Shapovalov, he didn't go to Montreal. He stayed in Toronto. But I think also too, it's not just how you're told to hit the forehand or backhand, but it's the traveling with how they organize that
Yeah.
with, the ranking system in the U.S. A lot of times kids are just hesitant to take time away from tournaments because they're worried about getting into the next tournament.
I'm not a big fan of the ranking system in Canada right now, because you can get a high ranking just by traveling and playing ITFs. So you can become top 5 in the country just
That transfers back to Canadian ranking system.
yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So sometimes it's like, you can go to the middle of nowhere to play an ITF, you make the quarterfinals and you get X amount of points, and all of a sudden you're top 10 in the country. So I'm not sure it's the best ranking system.
The Canadian population, it's 10% basically of the U.S. You're a larger country geographically, but for the most part, the Canadian population live within 100 miles of the U.S. border.
Yeah.
But so all the logistics, but I think one also thing that's really good about Canadian tennis is they jockey the age group tournaments. So if you do well in the 12s, I'm not sure exactly how it works. I'm sure it's changed a little bit from year to year, but if you're in the quarters of the 12s, you get to go to the 14s.
Yeah. It's not quarters. I think semis.
Semis, okay.
You're in the semis, you go to the 14s.
Yeah. I have to say this when I'm talking about Canadian tennis. Miran Mann and Mario Cosentino. Mario Cosentino finished third. He was not Brad Dancer. He's a coach at Illinois. With Frankie Danzovic. That's my senior moment. Frankie Danzovic, Danzovic. And I remember I did some video work for Danzovic. He's actually on our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied. I mean, he had a win over Roddick. He, win 3 sets with Nadal. I don't know, 60 in the world. But Mario lost. I think a kid from Quebec named Silva, who ended up playing at Georgia. That means he's a really good tennis player. But at that time, he was 6 feet tall in the 14s. He was a giant. But I'll never forget this. And I think that happens with all federations. The funny money is Mario is all set to go to Japan. He finished third. So he may go all the way to Japan and play in the 14s, the world group, or the world championships. And last minute they said, sorry, Charlie, you're not going. They took 2 players and 2 coaches. And I was just shaking my head with, I really didn't coach Danzovic. I did video work for his father, but it's like, 2 out of the 3 kids Mario hit the ball really, really well. But I think overall, Tennis Canada for the longest time was, and this is a compliment, they're very good on paper, learn to learn. There's just so many things that they put out that I think were excellent. But then, it's someone to be in charge of tennis in a country, how to get people to work together. Dave Fish was on and talked about just competition. Fish has always said, very smart guy, the 2 toughest things is what has to improve is tennis competition and tennis instruction. And the UTR there's been some positives, there's been some negatives, but that's the world of competition. Instruction, if we could just have people agree to do skill testing, instead of necessarily how to hit the ball, but just where to hit the ball. Put everybody through these skills tests. Can people be at the net, hit forehand volleys, pass the service line in the quadrant behind, the area behind. Anything that can be measured can be improved. So, we're going to rule out how to teach tennis, but let's just go where can we agree where to hit the ball.
And have everybody on the same page.
Well, just as the skills test.
Yeah.
People teach the alphabet differently, but the alphabet's the alphabet. How do people end up with a high reading level and a low reading level? But just say, okay, we're going to have players. It's when I was a kid, JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, everybody in the country had to do these 4 exercises. One was sit-ups, one was push-ups, one was squat thrusts, and one was an agility drill with your feet. And when you were a senior in high school, you had to carry someone a mile. And it was chauvinistic, it was sexist, it was for the boys. It should have been for the girls, but I mean, I don't really like the term girls push-ups where you're on your knees and, you don't do a push-up where your body's in a prone position, you're on your toes and you're on your palms. But you had to carry a kid for a mile, and they had to be within 10 pounds up or 10 pounds down of your weight. But just measurements. Instead of getting into methodology, Braden, there is no, Vic Braden method. It's the method of physical law. But, just where to hit the ball. It's okay. We have a, 10, 20, 25 skill shot tests. We feed 25 balls at targets. And then you sit down with a group of parents and go, well, they would do better if they took it a second time because they would understand the directives. They wouldn't be as nervous. But your kid got 32%. They out of 25 shots, they executed 8.
And this is easy to implement.
It is. Yeah. Then it's no discussion on grip, swing, body. It's like, look, let's just where to hit the ball. And, granted, people can have inefficient, unorthodox strokes in the human brain. They can figure it out. But, kids don't understand when you have drop hit balls in the alley. Vic Braden, 19.1 degrees, and you make it a game, and you keep score, and one ball, the kid's catching it and then drop hitting it back, and you have that going on those technical courts. But when you have a kid drop hit the ball in the alley, they just think it's a dumb, boring drill. A lot of times they think it's a dumb, boring drill if they can't do it. But, Vic Braden used to say it's a sidewalk. Down the line is a down line sidewalk. Cross court is a cross court sidewalk. Path of the racket, path of the target. How about the togetherness in Montreal as far as inter-club matches and pros, not only within a club, but how do they work within a city?
It's very personally, I find it very competitive, but there's probably, I'd say there's 3, maybe 4 competitive clubs. Maybe you can add one, maybe 4 or 5 competitive clubs. So you have Nuns Island, Tennis 13, Côte d'Alias, and now there's a new one, Brossard, and Carrefour Multisport.
My pronunciation, Repentigny?
Repentigny too, yeah. But Repentigny is a little bit further. Okay. Repentigny is maybe a 45-minute drive from Côte d'Alias.
Okay.
It's a little bit off Montreal.
I took kids to a national tournament was played there.
Yeah. Well,
a couple times.
They still have the big international tournament, the G1. Well, now it's called J1.
This was a Canadian national.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been to Canadian nationals, Niagara Falls, White Oaks. Yeah, but I've never really been in Western Canada. Here it's beautiful.
Yeah, I've only been once or twice. So I was there this year for the nationals in Calgary, and my grandfather used to live in Victoria. So, but that was a long time ago. I was young.
It was many years ago now, but a group of Canadian friends demanded that I apply to work for Tennis Canada. I said, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. But I did apply. And I remember being on the phone twice with Bob Brett. And Canada, they didn't have anybody in Vancouver. And I was just told by the Canadians that were pushing for me to apply that the Western Canadians would allow someone to come in and just do their own thing. Because, I mean, obviously I would want to come in, and it's not that I wouldn't be a team player, but I was invited to a meeting with the USTA many years ago, and they said, well, we're thinking about putting a committee together, and we think it would be great to have you be on the committee. And we're going to develop a system for tennis teaching. And I said, well, I'd be interested in talking to you about it, but there's already systems in place that it's already there. You don't need to do anything new. Certainly you always want to tweak things and improve, but it's already there. But of course, when you apply, the same exact thing happened with the USTA, group of people, friends in the tennis. When I was talking about you pounded on the table. I don't know if I said that clearly, but a lot of my podcast coaches, I've coached them. I've been criticizing them, so they call me up and give me some shots on the podcast, which is all good fun. But I did apply to. They were looking for someone to run the juniors at Flushing Meadows, But what I was told by both, and I haven't applied for too many jobs. I'm an old guy. It's like put a resume together. That I was overqualified, and they would talk to me about another position. But and I do think that the USTA, what we have assembled, there's the USPTA, the alphabet soup, the PTR. People would laugh at me, but some would laugh because we're just a drop in the ocean, but we're so small that because of the Braden cornerstone, Van Horn, Vandermeer with his input. These are all, unfortunately, people that are deceased. But the 8 pillars, that what we have is something that should be recognized by federations.
I agree.
And it's not, again, my name in third person. And Andy Fitzell did 2 hard years with us here recently, and it was great that that people know more about Andy, but it wasn't Steve and Andy stuff. I mean, there's so much history to it.
Yeah.
What do you like, dislike? I mean, how could we improve? I guess up front, first thing first, what do you like about the GreatBase?
For me, it's logical. I call it the magic formula. It makes sense. It's logical, sequential. It organizes coaching. It organizes my coach. Like I'll just speak for myself, but it organizes my coaching. It makes sense technically. It makes sense tactically. As you guys put it on your website, it's fact-based information based on logic and science.
For long-term development.
Yeah.
It's not for instant gratification.
Yeah.
If people are going to follow the body of work we put together, you got to bend and jump, you got to hit volleys, you got to hit overheads, you got to go to the net. It's not, just running around backhands and hitting forehands. One of the players, I heard them ask you about the different academies, and I really liked your answer because you use the word formula.
Yeah.
That we have a formula. You can learn from every environment. I think one thing for us, we're not doing squad training. So right now we don't advertise our former students, send us students, and we have all different levels. So there's some positives to that. But I think upcoming what we need to do is this is a camp, and this is for more entry-level players, families that want to get started, and this is more of a tournament player camp. In some ways, it's great to have it all be one, but we end up teaching too many times to the not whatever. How would you define that? The people who need the most work. We end up spending too much time on technique because you get somebody who's new. We're going to focus on empathetic educator. We're going to focus on the person who needs the most attention.
Yeah, which makes sense too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think if somebody's only here for a few weeks, it's so important to teach them to teach. It's so important for them to just be immersed in technique. But then if they leave, their impression, they don't realize how much physical work you have to do, how much running you have to do.
Yeah.
The critical side, I'd like to ask people for the negative. When I was training tennis teachers formally, where it was a degree, we would have debates. And of course, I had more experience than my students, so I would take the other side. Why you want a volley with a continental grip on the forehand side versus a composite? Let's argue. And I would take, because so many things that we do, we're the minority. We're the minority. It's because no, it's just continental. That's it. Let's go move forward. And they don't understand the subtleties. They don't understand the tennis maths. Certainly, the GreatBase would not allow for someone to have an unorthodox stroke. I mean, Monica Seles, just growing up in a town where you couldn't hit on a tennis court until you were 12, and she just endlessly hit against the backboard. I don't like the GOAT conversations, greatest of all time, but when you win 8 out of 9 Grand Slams, I mean, I think it's unfortunate that her name's not mentioned more often. But she had, and there's that's one thing is that it's not going to allow for that unorthodox player. But what comes to your mind with what could improve?
I think one thing would just be to maybe have a little bit more fitness, so a little bit more strength training. I think that's important. Just a little bit more fitness. I think it's important to be really fit in today's tennis world.
Yeah, tomorrow you're still here for a few more days. Tomorrow I'll show you. We have not only here at FM, but we have 2 garages, and I'll show you the equipment. I just spent thousands of dollars on some fitness equipment, and it hasn't been used all summer long. Of course, we're out, and, it's 100 degrees, it's 120 on the court. But say, for example, Alex and Zakaria, they're at a level where they need to be doing weight training.
Yeah, it's important.
Oh, for sure. I'm at the age group where weight training is the most important for old people like me. That's if you're going to do one thing. I mean, lift weights.
To me, it should be done at the end of the day. So when you finish your trainings at 5:30, head over to the gym.
I like the idea of starting the gym, ending the gym. But in Florida in the summertime, we start outside because you got to beat the heat.
For sure, yeah.
So, and then, like this summer, we haven't been going over to the track. Like today, tell us about your beach workout.
So what I do on the beach workout is a lot of short sprints, change of direction, explosivity, broad jumps, sprint shuffle, bear crawls, just all around athleticism, but working a lot on change of direction. Tennis is a lot of change of direction, a lot of short bursts, relay races.
Now it's again, it sounds like it beat up kids all the time. Kids don't play outside in America now, and my mother used to say, drive through a neighborhood, they must be inside playing with a butler. I do have this question I ask kids, why does the ice cream truck not go to the rich neighborhood? Because the kids aren't home. They're going to piano on Monday, they're going to gymnastics on Tuesday, and they're programmed out, or not to be nice, they're programmed. But it's difficult to get a group of kids to play basketball because not everybody can play. I mean, I was a terrible basketball player, but I could play defense. It's like, okay, I'm not going to shoot, but I know I have to stay between the man and the basket, and I've got to be Charlie Hustle. And, but yeah, there's not that backyard, playground, sandlot, pickup sports. And but basketball is, to me, certainly I think ice hockey, where you got to use your hands and your feet, and you got to keep your head up because they'll try to knock it off. Soccer is great, but I think that kids need to do a number of different things. There's only so many hours in the day, but that comes down to short-term visitors versus long-term visitors. I've worked with Roberto Calla, who you mentioned. I worked with him for 15 years, and every day we play soccer. Okay, Roberto, for 20 minutes. And, they love it. And, if you could have somebody play 20 minutes a day, even just pick up soccer with different levels. But then, I think that should take place on tennis courts. The coaches from Philadelphia are visiting. They loved your beach workout today. But we had them on the court the other day, and we said, okay, this is what's in this big duffel bag. We got baseball gloves, we got soccer balls, footballs. But again, when people come to us, generally they need to do so much on technique. And so we have a pyograph, and someone's here for 3 weeks. We're not in the gym. We're not dribbling basketballs going backwards. It's like strokes, strokes, strokes. You've been here enough. Like, say, this young boy who's 17, who's here, his pre-post is a shocker. This is how you hit the ball. We filmed him at the end of the first day. But this is how you hit the ball at the end of the first week. This is how you hit the ball at the end of the second week. And then you even tell him when he goes home, he can't go back to the mainstream. Because instruction, destruction. If you've had technical teaching, you need technical training.
Yeah.
So you need very few people can actually not revert back. They get the competitive juices flowing, and just to get kids to slow down and to drill 100% with your feet, 50% with a racket. You can't hit a winner.
It's not easy.
Or then the next step is you can only hit a winner if you're in the green zone. You don't hit a winner that, say, okay, no overheads. You can only hit a winner that after you hit the volley, can you touch the net? And if you hit the volley and you can't touch the net, you don't win the point. It's too bad in some ways that we have to do forced teaching because kids don't, for the most part, call another kid up and let's just go rally 1,000 balls, like Harold Solomon said, top 5 in the world. Let's go hit the backboard. I know it's been great. We had go to a park where there's 16 backboards. I had a coach tell me today, came to visit, saw the backboards, and was just like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
That doesn't exist in Montreal.
It doesn't exist many places in Florida. It's in Florida, there used to be all over the place, 3-wall racquetball. Lived in Tampa, worked in Tampa for 15 years. Before the pandemic, I took a group of juniors to play the Jesuit high school team. Joe Curtis, great guy. He's been coaching the team 25 years. And go to a place I worked at for a long, long time. And they had the 3-wall racquetballs, plus they had a huge backboard. They knocked him down.
It's sad.
Someone said, well, it was an eyesore. It's they didn't do anything else with the space. They just knocked them down. And there's a fence around it, and there's no problem with graffiti. And like, why did they do that? Backboards don't make money, but to be able to just hit against the wall with what's in the future. You've got you're going to go back to the fall. What's in the immediate future for you in the fall? I mean, if you have to worry about the Great White North becoming white again.
Yeah, well, that's one thing in the future.
What's the difference between your day-to-day when the weather's nice and now, starts to snow in Montreal September 3rd or, no, I'm just teasing. By November, there's no more outdoor tennis, right?
No more outdoor tennis. As of middle of October, probably. But actually, it gets busier for me in the winter. I end up going from probably 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. every day on court, maybe with an hour or 2 hours off court to work on administration. And in the summers, I'm gonna go probably 7 or 8 a.m. till maybe 6 p.m. And I get a little bit of time at the end of the day to work on my game. So it's a little bit more challenging in the winter to work on my game. But I'm gonna have a little bit more responsibility this year. I'll be in charge of a group of players in the sports study, and I'll be in charge of an after school group. So I'm gonna be implementing GreatBase 100% with the after school group, the cones, the shadow swinging, the wall. I'm gonna actually have a wall on one of the courts I'm on. So
yeah, our listeners, when Patrick says wall, we just have kids go up to a wall and put their palm against the racket for the forehand volley, or put the tip of the racket on the fence, perhaps on an outdoor court, and you just shape the swing. Vic Braden used to have on the side of the court, it just looked like a letter C. It was a loop. And you just have players go over and just trace the swing. You just have to do all these routines. Of course, with after-schoolers, you got to get them to practice at home. The parents got to put up the mirrors, and they've got to practice. 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. They just have to do that. To set up an indoor area in your house, not only for technical routines but for physical, athletic routines.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be us as a team. We're going to be implementing another thing called through Google Docs. So the athletes at the end of every day are going to have to just fill out a little questionnaire or journal. They're going to have to put how much screen time they had in a day, how much sleep, what they ate, how many hours of practice did they do at home, with the cones, the mirrors.
Remember Jim Lair had a great daily monitoring chart. And I have to be honest, we tried and tried, but we were never successful getting people to use a daily monitoring chart. And our standards has gone down. People have come to visit, and now we say 3 and 3. And a lot of times coaches will come to observe what we do, and they're like shocked. Run everywhere you go. You have to go to the bathroom, run. You've got to, you forgot something in the locker room, run. Just run everywhere you go. And we now have people pick up 3 and 3. It used to be 1 and 1. Sometimes it'd be 1 and 1, lunges going backwards, and the work ethic. I don't blame it on the player, the junior, the parents. It's just society.
Yeah.
I think that, they have to cut down screen time, but are they doing the routines? But the daily monitoring chart, we used to issue a journal. And then we would look at the journal. So we want kids to take notes and then, write things down. Today we had a follow-up. Harold Solomon spoke to us yesterday. It was magnificent what he had to say. My college teammates, they were practicing 2 hours, and he was so positive about his college teammates, but I knew I had to practice 3 or 4. They ran an hour, I needed to run an hour and a half. I just need to do more work. And then we had a follow-up meeting today. Okay, what do you have to contribute? But just to be who I am, I said, okay, everybody, why don't you hand in your sheet on notes from what Harold Solomon said. Everybody's kind of looking around. I think that's one of the reasons that they're not used to doing that is, first of all, if I were to walk through your tennis club, I'd say, okay, where can we have a classroom? Where can we make videos? And, and it actually, from a business standpoint, it generates revenue. But, to get kids to be academic. I have players that are here off and on quite a bit that I've worked with 5 years or more. And we get in the van, and I try to make the van a classroom. And I'll go, guys, get a notebook on your lap? No. Because as a tennis teacher, tennis coach, there's no consequences. I'm not giving them an A, B, C, D, or F. For 10 years of my career, I was in 81, 91 in Tyler, Texas, and I was off the charts with toughness in some ways. Frank Hornick could tell you that, because we were perceived as underwater basket weaving. I go, okay, I'm going to make this a challenging course. But it's a whole different world when you can flunk someone. Trying to get the sheepskin.
He said not many passed.
Well, coming back to it, accounting, perfection is the minimum standard. We had one professor who, and this is back when they used ledger sheets, and it was so different, but no, I think quite a few people passed the tennis portion, but to actually get the degree, accounting was the problem.
Okay.
Accounting was a problem. When I was there, we didn't offer certification, but shortly afterwards they did. Unfortunately, that program dropped just a couple years ago. And, that's something else is the U.S. has an effort, USTAU, the university program. But that was when I was invited to a meeting, so we need to have a curriculum. And I know they're still working on it, some dedicated people, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. With what Braden put together, people who listen to our podcast with Ed Weiss on the Welby Van Horn balance system. What we've done, for example, with your group, under the trees where it's shady, it's okay, hands on your hips, and it only takes a few minutes to do that, and the very best players can do that. And if the best juniors in the program are doing it, it helps regulate kids. And they go, okay. What about bubbles? You have no bubbles at your place?
No bubbles. I've discussed it a little bit with the owner, and another one of our coaches who's taking the Club Pro 3 certification right now. He has to write a business plan. I believe that's going to be his business plan. So he's going to present it to the owners to bubble the 6 outdoor clay courts. But bubbles in Montreal, They haven't been very successful. In Ontario, there's more and more bubbles.
Why is that?
I don't know. We had one bubble put up, and within a year and a half, it was put back down. They had tournaments there, and you had to wear winter coats. It was minus 5 degrees.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, that makes sense. With tennis in Montreal, let's go with the Canadian greats right now. Fernandez, I mean, people do say that the pandemic brought more people to tennis. It's not a contact sport, not a collision sport. I hear people say all the time that the numbers have gone up. But Leila Fernandez, what she did at the US Open must have been a boost for Canadian tennis. I mean, can you feel that at this point? Or did she create excitement through that?
She created excitement, but so did Bianca.
Yeah.
So did Felix. So did Chapo. So there's been a bit of a buzz. So with the pandemic plus the success of these four young Canadians, tennis has really boosted up. But that brings challenges. There's pros and cons. So the challenges is court occupancy, difficult to find courts. Like in our club, the juniors used to be able, sports study would go from 2 to 5, and every day from 5 to 7, the juniors would play matches together. They'd all be on the courts. Now they can't find courts.
John McEnroe was in Lake Nona, where there's this magnificent facility. Perhaps too big, 100 tennis courts. Perhaps the USTA didn't need to spend all that much money on one zip code, but it's. My son saw it. He goes, yeah, it's a Disney World of tennis. It's an amazing facility, huge. So John McEnroe rocks up, and he's meeting with the national coaches, and have some insiders. One in particular, Matt Clore. He goes, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. He said, I have a problem. Is that I'm okay with Canada producing better hockey players than the U.S., but I have a problem with Canada producing better tennis players than the U.S. But I think right now, this was a few years ago, I think that especially on the men's side, there's more players that have come up recently that are higher ranked.
There's a few coming up too right now, like Alexis Galarneau. He got a wild card in the Masters 1000. He was around Felix's age. I think he's a year older than Felix.
He's big buddies with Felix. He went to NC State, right?
Yeah, he went to NC State.
I saw him play. I really enjoyed watching him play. I saw him play when he was a kid in Europe.
So he's been having some good results. There's also Gabrielle Diallo, who's playing for University of Kentucky. Big guy, 6 foot, at least 6'6", maybe a little bit more. Big serve. He's maybe about 500 in the world right now. He's playing. I think he plays behind Liam Draxel at Kentucky. By UTR, he's 4th or 5th in the United States Division I.
Yeah,
a couple guys.
This weekend, I have to introduce you to Casey Curtis. You know Casey Curtis?
No.
He's at the Battle Boca. He rents courts from Macy, and he was talking about Liam Draxel. Great kid, and I would think that he might not be at Kentucky anymore. I would, the school year starting. I would guess that he might. He's been ranked really high in the NCAAs, and my guess would be that maybe he would venture out to the Pro Tour. I have a couple questions left with talk to you all night with Quebec. Do the young kids from the Montreal area, from throughout Quebec, do they think of college tennis in the U.S. as a great option?
They do, but I would say it. I would say it's an option if you're top 8 in the province, top 7 or 8 in the province. Usually, if they're below 7 or 8, they're going to University of Montreal or McGill or Concordia. I would say there's about a handful of boys, handful of girls that head out to the States every year.
I remember for a long time, Texas would have a match with Canada. I mean, Texas is, when I lived in Texas, there were 17 million people. I'm going to guess there's 27 million people now. But overall, year in, year out, I know it switches, but where do the better players come from, Quebec or Ontario? I don't know. There's obviously it's not a countrified sport. Tennis is not really that countrified in the U.S. In other words, there's small towns throughout Canada. It's really Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto. There's players from Calgary and Edmonton, everywhere, but of course it's population based too.
Yeah.
But where the better players come from year in or year out, Quebec or Ontario?
It varies. It's between Quebec and Ontario, but it varies. It could be a girl. It could be 1,800 girls Ontario, 1,800 boys Quebec. It really varies. I would maybe give Ontario the edge.
There is an article, a report on Richmond Hill, Thornhill, this area, suburbs of Toronto that produce so many top 100 players or so many players on the WTA ATP tour. Now in Ontario, you go to a junior tournament. I just know from experience is you may not hear English spoken. I mean, it's cosmopolitan. There are people from all over the world in Toronto, but the immigrants are playing tennis in Toronto. How about in Montreal?
It's also immigrants. It's a lot of immigrants. You have the locals, you have the Quebecers as well, but there's a lot of immigrants. I mean, it just look at the kids that came on this trip with me.
Okay.
You have Alex and Zach, Ukraine and Algeria, Elliot, China, Mathis, Vietnam, Angela, Vietnam, Kiera, they're from Montreal, but that's 5 out of 6 that come from somewhere else.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's amazing. You think of Federer's mother or Federer's wife. I mean, you could just pick players out. Agassi's father. Vince Spadia's mother. I think of Karina Mariah. You just name players randomly. Both parents from Romania. Who works harder? There's a question in the U.S. Who works harder, the immigrant, or the kid who's his parents Euro-Americans, so many of them, but they don't think of themselves as immigrants because it was 4 generations ago where their parents came over. Who works harder in Canada, the immigrants or the kids? I shouldn't say Canadians, native Canadians. Who works harder?
To me, the kid who doesn't have anything is the one who's going to work the hardest.
Yeah.
You'll find the locals that work hard, but I would have to say probably immigrants.
Affluenza, great word. John McEnroe, he stole that from somewhere, but because I had heard it beforehand. My kids have affluenza. My older brother used to say it's hard to have rich parents and poor kids. I think parents have to be very clever and make your own lunch today, or just find ways. I love to say that you mentioned one of the girls who was here has worked at McDonald's. I mean, I tell 16-year-olds, if you took the summer, even part of the summer, but fair to McDonald's, just go work at McDonald's all summer. That would be better for your tennis game than playing tennis all summer. To get your hands dirty, get the mop out. And
it's important.
That doesn't happen. Well, Patrick, your owner, what does he say again? That's a great line he's got for you.
The future of tennis.
No, it really is so true. The future of tennis. I do think it's a problem. I was shocked. The USPTA, again, I could be wrong, but it was 30 and 30. And what's that mean? Is that they wanted to get, in the United States of America, they wanted to get 30 new pros that were under the age of 30. And I go, really? I mean, it's not 3,000. And there's been so many efforts to try to teach people on college campuses and what have you, but I do think that your group, and I can't keep track of X, Z, millennial, whatever, you don't really need to have labels, but so many young pros like yourself are not being mentored. They're not going to go hang out with Frank Hornig. Frank's got to be close to my age, if not my age. I mean, he might have been just a couple years younger than me. I was so young running that program, but I think they can just go with their fingertips and go to YouTube. You need to be mentored, and it's I think that you could tell our listeners that being here versus looking at content online, what's the difference?
As you heard me tell two mothers that we spoke to a week ago, being here, the technique is a bit of a bonus, but being here is more about how I see you interact with the kids. You're able to really pick the thing that's gonna help that kid, not only on the tennis court, that's gonna help that kid in life. And you're able to just pick at it and pick at it and pick at it, and like Zachariah with the ego, Alex with the work ethic, Angela with the texting with Alex and the work ethic. I'm bringing it up here, but
no, that's all spot on. I call it pushing buttons. I think of a girl, Julia Hutchke. I mean, she's just a brilliant student. Hey, this kid's not doing anything wrong. She didn't force much. She didn't go forward. But you got to find, okay, you're here to get better. You've got to find weaknesses, and it's not to, do anything but make them better.
Yeah, because that's their roadblock. If they can overcome that, then they're free.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been in the kid business since I was a kid. I have kid radar, and I meet some parents, and the families are so much smaller now. But yeah, if you have two children, okay, and the oldest one's 15, so you have 15 years experience with one kid. So you have two kids, all right. So now we know how old is that child? 10. So you have 10 years experience with two kids. Just to get the parents to stop. So, so many parents, big brain, socioeconomic function levels, if they can afford tennis, if they didn't inherit it, they're pretty intelligent. Vic, you say most pros can't afford their own lessons. But, someone can come and stay with us, say, this is my opinion, I like to stay away from opinion, but if someone comes and stays with us for 2 weeks, and they're staying with us, they're our guests, we know them better than the typical club pro who's worked with them for 2 years. Because they're away from home, and you just see their organizational skills, their work ethic.
Responsibility.
Roberto's always using that word. That was Vic Braden's favorite line. Take responsibility. And the intangibles. Like one spouse passes away, the other spouse has, they're shocked because they don't really even know what the other spouse did, a husband, wife. And parents, for sure, they don't realize how much they're doing for their children. They get tired of telling their kids to turn the lights off. They turn the lights off. They get tired of telling their kids to pick up the dirty clothes. They pick up the dirty clothes. And the kids, it is amazing that the phone. Kids don't daydream anymore. It's good to daydream. It's just good to look out the window and the quality of life. I heard someone say this, is that the quality of life is when you're not switched on. You're not, maybe that's the wrong term. You're not tied to anything electronic. If I had, like today, I was busy and I was with these two young coaches, and someone asked me, did you get my text? And I looked at the person and said, I haven't looked at my phone in 4 hours. And
that's healthy.
Yeah, but also too, in all fairness to young people, once a week I'll forget my phone. That's my age. Is that, but for most young people, it's like it's their heart. It's like it's a third arm. They're not going to forget their phone. But no, I think what you're doing. I can just tell how passionate you are, and tennis. To make an understatement, tennis needs to have more people with your energy level, and you can just tell that and this is a compliment, that you're a lifer, that you love tennis. I think also too is that it's excellent that you didn't work in tennis right away. You know what you're saying about learning to weld and do different things, and um, I think that if some young kid who's trying to play the pro tour, if they took a year off and had to work in a cubicle and do something that wasn't too exciting, then they would realize like this is fun playing tennis. You know, I think young kids make the mistake thinking this is work. But why don't we come to a close here? What closing comments? Appreciate you being on our podcast. I think it was great how you were so honest about your story. I mean, you had so much support. You went from one academy to the next. You were at some world-class academies. How you circle back with Frank Hornig. How you mentioned, you know, you had to have a 3.5 with this contract the coach gave you.
Yeah.
Great contract. Having a 3.5 versus so you were in some academic trouble.
Yeah.
But I think Jim Lair, storytelling for mental toughness. You know, make it a story. It's like it was yesterday where the kids listened to Harold Solomon. Make that a story. I told all the kids you should call your parents up and tell them you met Harold Solomon. You should go to YouTube, read about him. You know, there's still YouTube clips of Harold Solomon playing Borg and this and that, and they didn't have a follow-up meeting. You know, he just nailed it about you know working hard. But why don't you end this podcast with a message for our listeners? You're a passionate tennis person.
Well, as you guys have heard the whole night, I'm 100% a believer in GreatBase. Obviously, my journey has been a bit of a bumpy ride, and personally, I try to be honest and open with all the parents of the players I work with and with all the players that I'm working with, and trying to put them on the right path from the beginning as soon as possible, even for those who like a Kiara who's been a little bit lost in the system, hasn't been given the information. It's never too late. She's 14. She's young.
Fast.
Yeah.
Great wheels.
And GreatBase is exactly what it's called. It's providing players with a great base, but a great base for tennis and a great base for life as well. Which Steve, it's a lot about the character building, the mental toughness, and as Steve mentioned it, he's trying to save their tennis games when he spoke to all the class the other day. But then Roberto said, "No, Steve, you're saving their lives," and I think those words are very true in many ways. So,
yeah, Roberto. I think if it does come to an end, with tennis. I mean, you can keep playing for a lifetime, but when I say it comes to an end, your parents, junior tennis, your parents don't keep writing checks. You're 22 and you're going to take lessons. But no, I really appreciate you being on. Appreciate what you had to say. I should never do this. My mother would correct me, my late mother. But what you just said, you used one verb that you need to change. That verb is believe. You'll say, I believe in the GreatBase. And, then we have people saying, well, it's a cult. It's not a cult. And perhaps I've had people say that, that is not a bad thing, being a cult. But if I take this pen and I drop it, is it going up or down? It's going down. I mean, I drop this pen. Do you believe that it's going up or going down? Or do you know? And we know that people need a GreatBase. You just need to have fundamentals. And the sooner, the better. And it's just tragic when parents are spending hard-earned money and it's they're not getting value for the money. But the more important, Dennis Van Der Meers always say that, is money can be replaced. Time can't be. And to be able to look a kid in the eye, and I say kid because we work with so many kids. We do train coaches, and I don't do that many adult clinics. I have done some. I told that story the other day where I was doing an adult clinic, and I just said, okay, jog a couple laps, get your body temperature up, and the adults all looked at me because adult tennis class in this country, adults don't jog a couple laps. They just start whacking tennis balls. But the word know is we know that you have to have a great base. And I think that Dave Secker a couple weeks ago said it best is that, I say, well, every month we're going to call it solid fundamentals. Dave Secker said, you should call it safe tennis. You watch some kids and you just know that they're going to have problems with their elbow, they're going to have problems with their shoulder, and it's not good. But no, again, Patrick, thank you very much. What is it, 108, 109? These podcasts, we keep marching forward, and I not only thank you, Patrick, but I thank our listeners. I'm just amazed. I saw someone at a tennis facility today, and they came up to me and said, I listened to your podcast. And I know there's more and more podcasts. Everybody and their brother has one. But our podcast, if people listen to it, it's connecting people. And they start to realize that there is a network and there is success. We don't even mention very often that you can go to GreatBase Tennis Facebook, Instagram. We have the GreatBase website. We have courses. And I think the podcast we had on Henry, you had a chance to spend time with Henry at the age of 13, self-learning. It wasn't peer teaching, that was self-learning. And I think that we're not a magazine interviewing touring pros and the coaches and the trainers of touring pros. I mean, there's so much of that, and I think that's great, that's inspiration. But for the most part, that's not information. But Patrick, thank you. Listeners, thank you. Adios, amigos. See you next week.